Beginning to actually write your book instead of just dreaming about it is so hard that it can easily tempt somebody to quit before they've even begun their book. But today I'm here to tell you that you can start and complete your book, whether you only have an idea or you've already begun your story. I've done extensive research over the past weeks asking my friends and family what they think makes it so hard going from the planning phase to the writing phase, and what I found was different than I expected, though it makes sense. Though every person had a different answer, one thing in common between all of them was that every person who quit before they began writing did so because they either became overwhelmed or uninspired or something like it. So, right now I will show you how to get from one point to the next, step by step, so that no story goes unfinished. I will give you a concise yet helpful overview of this subject, so if you have any additional questions, comments, ideas, or even if you just want to say hi, it would make me so happy for you to leave them in the comment section. But I would be even more happy if you subscribed. I will see it, and when every one of you does so, it will totally make my day. So make sure you join the rest of my subscribers and subscribe. The question that everybody asks themselves before they begin writing is whether they planned enough first. If you need some help with planning, go watch my video all about it for some tips. It is important to make sure that your world has been thoroughly built, but not so much that you spend too much time lingering on any element. Planning and writing a story can be done by anyone, no matter how much time you have. All it takes is a little bit of work every day, or even less than every day, to finish your story in no time. If a small thing is missing, you can always add it later because as you write, usually the kinks work themselves out. So here's a checklist to make sure that you have everything you need. Firstly, you need to know what style, like tone, narration, POV, etc., you will be using as you write, so that your style stays the same throughout. If you're unsure of what style you should use, try writing a journal entry in the way that you might want to write your story. It can also help prepare your brain for writing and maybe give you a little bit more confidence to keep writing. Secondly, make sure your world building has been done thoroughly. There are plenty of world building checklists you can use online, like Notebook AI, but sometimes I find them overwhelming since I don't even need to think about all the elements that they list. When researching for this video, I found an amazing post by World Anvil about what you should know about your story, but it is more applicable to your own ideas. It will be linked in my description. If you don't want to use a pre-made checklist, you can check yourself easily by taking a few days with a journal and thinking about your book in reference to the world around you. For example, on a normal day, if you decide to, say, make breakfast for yourself, use that time to think about how it could relate to your world building. What do they eat for breakfast in my world? What time? What is the food like in general? Are there restaurants? And if these types of questions relate to your story, answer them and write them down. Thirdly, you have to make sure that your characters have been planned well. The most important thing is that they have to be human, or at least resemble the way humans think for the readers to be able to relate to them. Characters must have flaws, mannerisms, fears, desires, etc. To check if your characters have been built well, you can do some introspection to figure out some things unique to yourself and how your characters compare to that. For example, if you think yourself a creative person, is a certain character of yours creative or not? You can also try to put yourself in the character's shoes in your everyday life. When time comes to make a decision, you can think, what would my character do? Your characters will really come to life if you think things like that. Fourthly, you have to have a simple idea of your plot. Look at a plot diagram. Can you name the event that takes place during each of these points easily and clearly? If you can, that's a great start. But to go further, try to think of a few more points, since a real plot diagram might look less like this and more like this. And as a final check, I like to share my story ideas with others to see what they think. You don't have to, but it really is encouraging to have others give feedback or even constructive criticism to your ideas. So, once you feel satisfied, or even if you feel stuck, it's time to move on. If you have stopped getting places with your planning, it probably means that you're ready to write, even if you feel like a lot is missing. Remember, the kinks will usually sort themselves out. Now I know writing can be daunting, especially if you've never finished a book before or if you're short on time. You can't see the success ahead of you yet, so it is so hard to see what success looks like. but I encourage you to keep going, even if you just write 100 words a day or less, despite what you think of your writing. I'd hate to see a wonderful story go unfinished, as I always say. So, how do you begin writing? Well, all you really need is something to write on. Pen and paper, Google Docs, a writing website like Reedsy, anything will work. This will be your first draft, so don't worry about editing or fixing mistakes too much. That will come later. You don't actually have to write chapter 1 first, especially since, in my opinion, this one can be the hardest. I would recommend beginning with writing the first scene chronologically that you have planned out well, if you have. Because if you're like me, you thought of several scene ideas that almost carry the whole story. But if you do decide to begin on the first chapter, here are some tips to help you get started. Ask yourself the 3 important questions I mentioned in my Writing Your First Draft video, which you should also go watch. 1. What is missing or desired by my main characters? 2. What is the cause of it / what is preventing it from happening? And 3. How can I show that in the first chapter? Answering these questions can help you create a really captivating first chapter, since even though usually the rising action doesn't start until later, it should still be interesting, just like the whole story should be once the rising action starts. You have to give the readers a reason to keep reading past the first chapter. You should also introduce the reader to the world you've created. Now, you don't have to show them everything, of course, but give them something as a base to add on to when they read more about your world in other chapters. I have heard it said that every chapter in a book should almost act like its own part of a story, but less dramatic. It should have its own rising action, climax, resolution, etc. So especially in the first chapter, you can play with how you want to incorporate this. One easy thing that I think every good first chapter should have is some sort of a cliffhanger. It doesn't have to be huge either, but it will definitely help with hooking the reader, as I have mentioned. So, that is all the tips I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching to the end. You're one of the real ones. Happy writing!